Thanks for joining me on the picnic. More of you are welcome. Bring your food and come and have a chat. But over the course of the next 20 minutes or so, I'm just going to give a bit of a perspective that I've developed over the years on how we can really have a voice within the organisations we work with and explain some of the thinking behind what it is that we can do to help get to a better state. But first, a little bit about myself. Rob Vanstone, as you can see, I'm a bit of a busy dad and looking after my own sustainability problem, but we can discuss that at length at my stand if you want. My background really has been in the software industry, so really working with large enterprises to utilize their software, but that's really come from a position of optimizing for efficiency's sake, for getting work done better and trying to improve the life of those participating. Today I work at Contino, which is a consultancy. It's a transformation consultancy here in London, and my day job is to help organizations now transform into digital enterprises. But my mission, and something that I'm personally invested in, is to find ways of doing this at the scale required, but in a sustainable way. And there's a huge opportunity here to do things right. And as serendipity would have it, I've known Barry Chandler. Some of you may know Barry. He's the reason why you're all here. I've known Barry Chandler for quite some time, and I had some time on my hands over the last year, and I said, is there anything I can do, Barry, to sort of help? Are there any areas that we could work in? And he put his hands together and said, yes, actually, there is something that I have as a bit of a brainchild, and that's our 𝒃𝒊𝒌𝒆.org. And our 𝒃𝒊𝒌𝒆.org is designed to be a community that helps organizations actually do things at scale, but in a much more sustainable way. And that's really the background to this talk. And, when we talk about sustainability, we are bombarded with so much information. And usually that information, quite rightly, is about the catastrophe that's, looming ahead for our planet. There's irrefutable data. This is from the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, the IPCC, about the Arctic sea ice getting thinner, the world is getting hotter, and most of these conversations actually take this form. I mean, it's no accident that we're sort of talking about this today while COP27 is going ahead. In fact, I thought originally that's what Barry had bought me tickets to present there. But all of this information is coming at us, and I don't know about you, but when I start to understand where this is coming from, where our energy use is coming from, I do start to feel a little bit overwhelmed. And what is it I can do beyond lifestyle changes that I make and I try to make, turn lights off, use less energy, etc., in my day job, because the two things seem very separate. And in terms of, the evidence that the world's getting warmer, what is causing this, there are loads of sources we can go to get this information. And really, the impact of this is visible everywhere. But I didn't really come here to make this a kind of a sermon, right? The preaching that I want to do isn't around we're so bad, change your behavior, it's too late. That is being done by way more articulate people than I am. But there are certain things that we can do here to amplify our impact. I mean, this room is full of people that are really trying to optimize the way they do business, and you're doing it really well. And the discussions that we've had today from all of the talks actually have been very insightful. And I think from my perspective, that we're not at odds, right? Everything that we're talking about has sustainability at its roots. I mean, if it's dressed up as financial common sense or retaining talent or getting people to work on things that matter, great. But if it's about reducing waste in our processes, if it's about actually consolidating the things that we have so that we're not duplicating things, there's so many angles here that we could take. And there's something to be said about diverting attention and making sure that in our backlogs of activity, we are pursuing these agendas. Because, again, for me, it's something that I sometimes feel overwhelmed and helpless by, but there's definitely things that I can do. And when Barry came to me with the concept of 𝒕𝒉𝒊𝒔, the idea was to evangelize this amongst the enterprises that we're in contact with in my day job, in contact with events like this. But we didn't want to just evangelize, we wanted to do a bit more. So what we've done is we've put together a workshop called the Green Energy Technical Transformation, or GET workshop, that really delivers this value to the enterprises, right? And I think the big game changer here is it's not just about optimizing one small area within an organization like, cloud ops or how we manage our data centers on-prem. It covers the full spectrum of activities that professionals like yourselves are involved with. And it's bringing those together that's the game changer. Because I think from my experience, when we optimize parts of the whole, we make some significant gains. I had a really good conversation today with, you're going to have to say your name. Reet from Nationwide. Reet from Nationwide. I wanted to get it correct. Because, when we optimize at a moment in time, right, we don't necessarily foresee all of the other impacts on the system, but we also aren't necessarily talking to other people that are facing challenges and problems in other areas of the business. And that's really what the workshop that our Tech Legacy Org is designed to address, right? It's to get the right people in a room to then be able to have the discussion, understand the challenges different roles face, and do something about it, produce some kind of backlog, some kind of ideas board on what we could do when we leave this room tomorrow to make a positive impact. And so we look at the objectives and, we went through some of the setup there with what's going on the planet. But then we really dig into the areas that we can have an influence in. And we start with things like culture, because that's going to be huge, right? The fact that we're gathering here, you're spending your valuable time listening to someone like me talk about this, right, means that there's some energy in the room that can do something about this. But how do we get that as forefront in our minds? So we do dig into the culture side, but then we look at some other areas, the architectures that we're constrained by. So that's business architecture, enterprise architecture, platform architecture, call it across the whole scheme, data architecture. How can all of these play a part in driving down carbon emissions, which is the goal that we set? So the workshop puts this in a kind of a fun, more jaunty perspective, I would say, to drive these really serious concepts. Because what we want to do is not stodgify the debate or the conversation. We actually want people to be thinking in non-linear ways about what they can do. And breaking down the silos between those areas is really important, right? For example, if I dig into some of the cultural aspects, we talk about leadership. I've had a couple of conversations today, actually, again, from people at Nationwide around how people at the sort of practitioner end are really trying to do things in a certain way. They're trying to develop microservices and move from monoliths to distributed applications. They're looking at active-active, all technical solutions to a problem that's rooted in efficiency and modularization of the business. But they're doing it as a kind of addressing technical debt sort of space. And so the role of leadership is really important here. If we're serious about climate change, we should be looking at legal and moral responsibilities that we have as a business. We should be looking at standards that we can adopt. We should be at the forefront of the things we want our employees or people that work for us within the business to adopt for themselves. We should be exemplars of that. And so communication and tracking against meaningful objectives is really important from a leadership perspective. And if we have that mindset, then the culture can start to grow from that as well. We can see people making these changes. We can tie the things that we do. Maybe it's optimal and efficient, but we can also tie it to what's right, and why we're doing that. We can tie it to the goals that we publicly addressed across the organization and across the business community, that we're going to be carbon net zero by 2025 or whatever it is that we've placed our banner on. And actually people can see that they have an impact in doing that. And one of the areas that is generally overlooked, in my opinion, and I would love to debate this with you at the stand, is the technology area. Right? I have this conversation time and time again. We are committed to going carbon net zero by 2020. So we've got a fleet now of electric cars. We've got our supply chain to our cafeteria completely understood and is carbon neutral. We're looking at hosting our data centers in renewable energy areas. But what are you doing about what's in those data centers? Bit of silence, right? There's a little bit of reticence about digging into or peeling open that. And again, this community has been looking at that forever. So why hasn't that been attached to some of the sustainability areas? So we look at different topics from leadership right through to how we communicate, how we broadcast, how we build communities, and get people to be looking at what's going on and thinking, why aren't I part of that? Why aren't I involved in this? Who's doing this? And for me, that's what a community is about, right? It's something that's tangible that people can see is happening and want to be part of. Can't force it, absolutely not. But I've worked with enough people to know that it's on everyone's agenda in some form or another. We also dig into, the sort of more technical topics. So, as I said before, it's not just about one area and picking it. It covers the whole spectrum of delivering value to our customers. And things like, are we doing enough with the software or the hardware that we're using? Are we making the most of it? Are we getting the most value out of it? There's some really interesting statistics that come out of, and I'll share this presentation, the sources are here, but that come out of things like when we have a data center full of kit and we understand the sort of consumption that it has, and now we look at how much data we're processing. The data we're processing is rising exponentially, right? Over a period of 5 years, the curve of the data flowing through our systems and across the internet is an exponential growth. And yet, if you look at the kit that we're using to support this, it's a pretty flat line. And again, it's information like that, how we're using our technology, that hides maybe some truths that need investigating. So how are we able to use the same amount of equipment and yet process way more stuff? And it's generally because we're upgrading that equipment really quickly. We're actually throwing away old stuff. We're buying new equipment that's able to process faster and much more cheaply. And so there's a bit of a utilization question in there, buried in there. And the workshop will take you through those considerations. And what's really important is, as opposed to this conversation, which is very one-directional, these workshops are bi-directional, right, or multi-dimensional, because the group involved are now debating all of the situations within their context and figuring out how they do things and how they can collaborate. We talk about monitoring quite a lot, and so from a technology perspective, understanding what we're using, the kind of smart meter concept of the technology we're involved with, is still fairly limited. And I don't want to take anything away from the cloud providers, right? What they are doing in this space is phenomenal. They are looking at where their data centers are. They're looking at techniques to follow renewable resources to produce, to be able to deliver their value in a more sustainable way. But what it doesn't address necessarily is what's running in those, right? Is what's running in those optimal? Are we using, for example, just to take a very specific point, are we using programming languages that are efficient? And there's more detail around this, but if you're looking at Python versus C++, there's a huge disparity about workloads running in different languages, but that goes under the cover from a cloud provider perspective. So there's now a growing body of technical organizations producing software that can measure and quantify this. And again, it needs architecting into our solutions, right? It needs to be ingrained in our way of working. This kind of accounting for sustainability is huge. The cloud providers provide some of this. There are also third-party providers like 𝒕𝒕𝒐𝒏 who take them to task and break down what's going on. There are consultancies that drive sprints to establish what this is, and we're joined by eSynergy here, and who do a lot of work in the sustainability space as well. And what it is bringing all of this together, right, and trying to get a single view of how we're doing and how we're consuming. And I did actually have a cheeky logo slide. None of these logos, sorry Barry, none of these logos are in business with us. But again, what I want to reinforce is there's a community starting to form around this. And I have to say thank you to all of these organizations for support they've just given as we start to build. Because what you're seeing today at SEACON is the emergence of another sub-community that is really taking the skills that you bring and try and focus them on the initiatives that we can bring to bear to make our businesses more sustainable. And that's really what it is, right? Putting the planet as a primary stakeholder in the decisions that you take, your peers take, the people who work for you take, so that we can keep evolving our tech legacy along its mission. And that really is to work with the industry to be free of carbon emissions across the internet and all of technology used by enterprises as quickly as possible. And really, if you're feeling useless, right, and you don't have to, right? It is quite simple. If the bottom line is use less. Thank you very much.